On the 1st of the month, the numbers changed their manners. At 9:02 a.m., a line labeled Family ACH slid through my balance like a hand under a tablecloth and lifted a corner of our month. I printed the stub, then the second one, and held them to the lamp as if light could translate euphemisms. At the credit union, the teller-sweet girl with brave bangs clicked to a second screen and paused the way people do when their mouth wants to be kind and their job wants to be correct. "It's going to a family fund," she said. "Which family?" I asked, and the cursor blinked like a metronome for truth. A surname flashed that never sat at my table. Back home, my phone began its night performance. "Be reasonable. It's for family. It's always been this way. Don't make trouble." The word family stretched itself thin enough to cover strangers and thick enough to muffle questions. I set the receipt on the corkboard, wrote names on every dollar, and turned the phone face down. Night loves to give orders it can't defend in daylight. I warmed the kettle, opened the ledger, and let my pulse borrow the clock's calm. If this is family, it can say its full name in daylight. Asterisk, pull your chair close, sweetheart. Tonight we're talking about a transfer called family, and the day I asked which one, I'm going to tell it plain and American. No shouting, just paper you can hold, names spelled right, and a table that doesn't move when money tries to. If stories like this steady your hands, tap subscribe and leave a like so this porch light reaches another house. I promise dignity, receipts, and compassion without surrender. You'll hear how a polite memo line met a grandmother with a pencil, how witnesses sat down before hurry did, and how love learned the difference between a drawer and a window. We won't rush. We'll read it twice. And if you've ever been told to be reasonable when your balance said otherwise, this one's for you. Before you judge me, know what family has cost and saved at this table. Payday makes a certain sound in this house, the kettle starting a soft roll, the clock declaring itself brave, the chair giving one small sigh when I sit. I tilt the lamp a finger's width and let the grain of the table come up like a good listener. Ledger to the left, pen to the right, glasses perched where they won't fall into trouble, 4 envelopes fanned like neighbors leaning on a fence, groceries, church, transit, repairs. I touch each one the way you greet an usher present, grateful, unhurried. The deposit lands with its usual punctuality. I don't need the notification to know. Numbers keep a posture when they're behaving. I print the stub and press it flat with the back of my hand. Then, at 9:03, the balance takes a breath I didn't authorize. A line slides beneath the deposit as if it owns the sidewalk. Family Ahan lifts a corner of our month before the ink has cooled. The screen keeps a straight face. The ledger does not flinch. I write the amount that left as neatly as I write the blessings that stay. Groceries gets counted twice. Beans and milk expect familiarity. Church gets folded like gratitude and tucked where it won't brag. Transit slides into its sleeve with the hush. That means we'll keep our appointments. Repairs poor thing acts its thin share with the dignity of a nail set by a careful hand. The math, minus that mystery, holds. The feeling does not. I clip the printed alert to the little corkboard that lives by the pantry, the one where I keep appointment cards, a coupon that thinks it's important, and the recipe for chocolate cake I can make from muscle memory. I circle Family AHI with a pencil that's been sharpened by honest days. I write a post-it like a prayer, names on every dollar. The morning is a neighborhood of noises. A bus exhales at the corner. The upstairs neighbor laughs at a show where the jokes come with a studio audience. Somewhere a dog has opinions. I refilled the kettle, wipe a clean spot that didn't need wiping, and set the ledger exactly parallel to the table's edge, not because the world will fall off if I don't, but because neatness underlines courage. My ribaroll clicks into place where it lives. No decisions after dark. Read twice. That sentence has kept more lights on than any extension cord. I copy it into the top margin for this new pay period, the way a captain writes steady in the log when the sea behaves. The phone starts its little dance on the counterbank confetti. Cousin curiosities, but I turn it face down. Night loves to rehearse in the daytime, when it thinks no one is watching. I set the envelopes into their drawer and leave the drawer open a half inch. A reminder that abundance isn't the only proof of order. The house approves by settling its shoulders. I rinse the mug and stand it on the towel. Handle to the left for the person I've always been, a woman who blesses food, writes things down, and expects truth to be spelled out. On the corkboard, the circle around Family Ox seems to glow in the lamp's small weather. Not accusation, invitation, a question clearing its throat. Before lunch, I laced my shoes and walked to the credit union where the lemon scent and unwavering clock teach civics better than some schools do. I do not ask the first teller a single thing. I cash a small check and watch how her hands lay change in a tidy fan. I thank her and bring home the quiet. Back at the table, I open the ledger again just to hear its particular hush. Our life fits in these lines, lines that hold a month steady, the way a rail holds a train. I pat the page like the shoulder of a friend who showed up. Then I shut the book because a plan isn't a prison. It's a promise with hinges. I look once more at the corkboard and nod to the circle. I see you. I tell the memo line. We'll meet where names, where daylight. The kettle stops whispering and clicks off. Satisfied, I turn the phone over long enough to switch it to silent and back again to face down. Rules don't have to be loud to be strong. That rule kept the lights on and it lit the trail. I was raised where paydays shook hands with Saturdays, and nobody pretended cookies weren't a form of currency. The church basement smelled like coffee and floor wax. The union hall smelled like pencil shavings and decision. Men in work shirts folded raffle tickets with the same attention they gave to bolts at the plant. Women tallied totals in a school ledger, voices low, numbers exact, names on every dollar, my mother said, tapping the page with a fingernail painted the color of cranberries. If you can't say its name, it can't say the light bill. Granddad kept envelopes the way a conductor keeps time. Groceries, heat, church, shoes, left for luck. Friday nights he spread them out on the oilcloth, bills traveling into their towns with witnesses. He'd wink at me and say, "Money's a traveler. Give it a map and companions, and it'll come home." The station clock downtown taught me to respect minutes that stand up straight. Trains came and went. People waved. Life stitched itself along those rails. I learned to watch how good timing makes room for kindness. If you arrive when you said you would, someone can borrow your steadiness. He first appeared like that in time. No horn of plenty, just decent boots, hands that knew a hinge from a handle, and a laugh that didn't borrow space. He walked me home from the late shift along the sidewalk that always needs one more slab. We made a sport of reading receipts under the porch light. Merchant codes became constellations. 5,411, he'd say, and I'd grin. Groceries. 5,541, I'd answer before he asked. Gas stations. When a code didn't match the story, we circled it. Not to accuse, to understand. We called it marriage math. And it was more romantic than some rings. We practiced showing up. We paid what we promised, then praised what remained. Mama kept a cigar box labeled receipts in blue nail polish. When the lid stuck, she tapped it twice and said, "Memory with edges." We did not store secrets where we stored sugar. At the table, he held his elbows in and read the ledger like a man reading a blessing. I slid the envelopes to him the way you pass communion steady, with both hands. New York was the dream whispered at the train station. But home was where the stove clicked and the rent receipt got filed. We danced slow to the radio, learned to fix a leaky faucet with a rag and a prayer. And he bought me a little leather wallet with a zipper that didn't quit. In the pocket, I kept a pencil. Because life loves to give you numbers when you're halfway between here and somewhere. We promised to meet at supper. That didn't mean fancy plates. It meant chairs that remembered us, and a blessing that didn't skip anyone. We held each other to it, not with scolding but with soup. Time nodded and joined the meal. And then, as happens, the world cleared its throat. Overtime took a liking to him. Church asked for extra pies. Aunties discovered emergencies that coincided with weekends. The ledger kept telling the truth beautifully. I kept listening. The word family expanded like bread dough and began to ask for a bigger pan. We promised supper together until family started arriving without a face. We married in a week that fit inside a cash envelope. Modest rings, borrowed veil, sheet cake cut with a knife that had seen its share of potatoes. Our first apartment had a window that clicked in the wind and floors that forgave our two-step. The table pulled double duty, altar on top, desk underneath. We blessed stew above and sorted bills below, careful not to let gratitude and arithmetic trade places. The baby came, with lungs that believed in announcements and fists like punctuation. We learned to measure sleep in thimbles and love in pay stubs curled on the radiator. The ledger lived open beside a jar of pens that only worked when you told them to. We kept our rhythm: deposit, sort, fold, file, eat, rest, repeat. Then the friendly cracks. "It's to help folks," he'd say, emptying his pockets with that sheepish charm that knows how to survive a scolding. "Just this once." They said it's for family. as if the word itself were a receipt. A transfer here, a pledge there. A collection plate passed twice with the force of a good story. The first family memo felt kind, like loaning your sweater to someone shivering. The fifth felt scripted, like the same story, trying on new coats. I kept my voice warm because voices leave footprints. I kept my pencil sharp because math likes a firm handshake. Which family? I'd ask, not to sting him, but to invite a noun to take off its mask. Our branch or a cousin's cause, pantry or piano fund, names on every dollar. Love. He'd kiss the baby's curls, kiss me, and call me the auditor. Which made us both smile until it didn't. The table noticed before I did. A bowl went cold, waiting for a late shift that became a pit stop, that became a tradition. An envelope came up thin and apologized with its corners. I pinned the first family, ACH alert, to the corkboard and wrote a date beside it like you write a weather pattern in a farmer's almanac. Once is weather, 5 is climate. So I wrote the ribberol in the ledger margin where my hand would pass it 10 times a day. No decisions after dark. Read twice. Names on every dollar. It wasn't a dare. It was a door. Love can walk through, but the house won't fall. We still laughed. We still danced in the kitchen when the pot simmered just right. But I started clapping when the math balanced, not just when the door opened. It is possible to be tender and keep your name spelled correctly. The month rolled forward, polite as ever, and somewhere between 9:01 and 9:03, the word family learned how to travel without introducing itself. The ledger stayed open. So did my eyes. The first gift taught me mercy. The second taught me math. The voicemail arrived with the confidence of a parade marshal. This is the credit union calling to confirm your family transfer. It sang, as if confirmation were kindness. I pressed replay and wrote the words down in my ledger, because paper looks better when it's made to testify. A minute later, HR sent an email with the posture of a school announcement. Standing authorization on file. Please reply only if you wish to change the amount. I put my glasses higher on my nose. There's a certain elevation required to see the audacity in a sentence. I had never signed a thing. I walked to the credit union where the lemon air pretends the world is reasonable. At the counter, a new telenervous neat clicked through screens faster than her mouth could keep up. I asked for printed statements and the memo definitions. She nodded, printed, then, on a second screen that forgot to lie. I saw it. Community Family Outreach Restricted Donor Account. The cursor blinked next to a trustee name. I'd never heard in a house that knows its surnames the way trees know their rings. Is that where this family goes? I asked, voice soft enough to keep her from getting in trouble, firm enough to keep me out of it. She swallowed. It's a family fund. She tried, the way people call a thunderstorm weather. Which family? I asked. The screen answered for her, flashing a surname that neighbored ours but never sat at our table. The teller glanced at the camera and then at me with apology eyes. I thanked her anyway. She hadn't written the script. She'd only tripped a line that expected us both to be too tired to notice. Outside, my phone began its night performance even though the sky was bright. Be reasonable. It's for family. It's always been this way. Don't make trouble. The word family tried to cover strangers, and the word trouble tried to rename questions. I turned the phone face down and walked home with the printouts under my arm like a child I meant to protect. At the table, I smoothed the papers until they remembered they were mine. Community, family, outreach wore a halo of nouns that hoped to pass for restricted. Community, outreach, but virtue without consent is a costume. I circled the trustee's name, then wrote a sentence at the top of the page for anyone, even me who might forget. Names on every dollar. When the kettle clicked off, I poured calm into a cup and practiced the breath that makes truth legible. In through the nose, out through the reminder that secrecy ages poorly. Across the room, the corkboard watched like a patient judge. That evening, the couch council convened in my messages cousins with capes made of opinion. I let their words drift past like parade confetti. Nobody wants to sweep. Tomorrow, we'd ask the right offices, the right questions, in the right light. Tonight, I was practicing the oldest art I know, waiting without shrinking. I wrote the day's last line, square and level, request, original authorization, renewals, routing, trustee list, board resolutions. I kept my pen, and the house exhaled. The trustees shared our last name, just not our branch. By morning, my kitchen had become a suggestion box for other people's comfort. Be reasonable, it's for family, a relative texted. attaching a photo of a casserole as if warm starch were legal precedent. Another wrote, "You're making a fuss. People are depending on this. Fuss is what folks call accountability when it puts on its shoes." The credit union called cheerfully. "Good news, we can auto-renew the family transfer so you won't have to think about it." "I prefer thinking," I said, friendly as a hymn. "No automation without documentation." I typed my requests like a grocery list you don't eat until you get home. Original authorization with my signature. Renewal notices, OC routing map, board resolutions establishing the restricted account, current trustee list, and any internal memoranda referencing family transfer. I CC'd the branch manager and HR, and BCC'd my pastor and the clerk who knows where truth keeps its extra staples. Family arrived by phone and foot. "This is just how we help," said a cousin, setting a pie on the counter as if to weigh down my discernment. "We've always done it this way." "We also used to leave babies in cars with the windows down," I answered softly. "We learn." At the table, I set out to envelopes, one labeled bills, the other family, and then put the second one back in the drawer. "This table isn't a courtroom," I told the wood that has heard more cases than some judges. "We bless food here. Papers can visit, but they don't get to shout." The bank's email came back with a smiley tone and a blank file. "Documentation isn't readily available," it said. I replied with my grandmother's politeness in my mouth and a paralegal's pencil in my hand. "Please locate." I included dates and dollar amounts that would leave footprints. I added time by which you'll comply, and attached a copy of the teller slip where Community Family Outreach had accidentally introduced itself. "Somebody tried the shame door. You're hurting people who need it. We always think truth is a wolf. It's usually a shepherd. I'm protecting people who need ITUs included." I typed, and then placed the phone face down so I wouldn't start the sport of explaining. "I made tea. I folded a dish." I said my rigmarole aloud because hearing is a kind of cement. "No automation without documentation. No decisions after dark." Read twice. I copied the rule onto an index card and slid it under the salt shaker where it could season the room before bed. I lined my day like soldiers ready for a parade. Credit union manager 10 a.m. HR nonprofit by pastor and clerk. I sharpened a pencil until it could sign its own name. Then, I turned out the kitchen light and left the porch light on, so anyone considering a night conversation would remember how my house spells boundary. I set 2 envelopes, bills, and family, then put one back. "This table isn't a courtroom," Mara called from an office where the air conditioning speaks first. "If you loved him," she said gently, "you'd let it run." Love gets miscast as permission when money holds the script. "If I loved ease, I'd let it run," I answered. "I love us. We eat at a table that asks paper to say its name." Silence stretched like dough on a floured counter. I remembered nights I'd stuffed holes with quiet help, paid a bill at midnight so morning wouldn't blush, made apology breakfasts for choices I didn't make. The ledger never scolded me. It just waited for me to bring verbs back into daylight. Pay, record, reconcile, review. A text lit my screen from an unknown number. "It's not what you think. Please, tonight is a salesman with a good tie." I flipped the phone face down and turned to my printer. 6 months of statements shuffled out like chapters that thought they could avoid the plot. I printed donor acknowledgments, to the sort where everyone is anonymous and nobody is truly unknown. I laid the pages in rows and labeled them with careful letters, through F each month, a quilt square. I circled family ACH until the pattern confessed its rhythm. I underlined the recurring time 9:03, on the regular bite more than charity, less than rent, exactly enough to tilt the month. I stapled each page to its stub like mittens on a string so nothing could slip away on the walk to town. Mara tried a second time. "Softer. Maybe it's helping someone you'll never meet." "If I'll never meet them," I said, "they'll still be in the daylight." Anonymous is not the same as unaccountable. She exhaled. "You've changed." "I've practiced," I said. "Practice turns be reasonable into be readable." The sun slid lower. I made to Folders Bank and nonprofit and slipped the pencil note from my late husband into the first. "Slow is not refusal. Slow is repair." I touched the words until my breath remembered me. Then headlights washed my curtains, slow and deliberate, like someone deciding if the bell rings them or they ring the bell. The phone hummed a third time, insistent as a mosquito. I left it face down and stood, not to invite, but to clarify. I turned the porch light on the kind of boundary that glows. At the corkboard. I pinned the newest acknowledgement beside the old alert. To polite strangers who didn't know I'd started introducing them. I looked at the ledger, at the bowl waiting for soup, at the chair that keeps my shape. We'll keep our promises, I told them all. We'll keep ourselves. I straightened the stack of exhibits until the edges agreed with one another and the kitchen remembered it was mine. I labeled the exhibits, then headlights washed my curtains. The door swung with urgency attached. He didn't sit. Urgency never does. A cousin by blood, salesman by tone. He fanned pledge cards on my table like a magician's warm-up, then slid withdrawal slips across the grain. Fees go up if we miss the window, he said, as if windows were wild animals. Sign here. It's for the family name. Coffee, I asked, because hospitality is a boundary with manners. He declined with a smile that had seen practice and reached for my ledger. The way boys used to reach for a steering wheel when you offered them the map. My hand met the cover for flat.com/factual. This book travels in daylight, I said, and never without witnesses. He laughed, the kind that tries to diminish what it won't defeat. Don't make this bigger than it is. I'm making it as big as it actually is, I answered, rotating the pledge cards so the lamp could read them. The memo lines wore family like perfume. He stacked words: fees, urgency, obligation, legacy. People will talk, he warned, pressing a pen into my palm like a dare. They'll say, you don't care. They already do, I said, and they're wrong. In daylight. I stood, not to loom, but to reach the porch light. I flipped it on. Gentle Gold walked into the room and sat everywhere. If we're going to use the family name, I said, we'll do it where neighbors can see. He stared at the doorway, considering escape back into shadow, then chose another script. He's under pressure, he said. This keeps him from drowning. Then we'll build him a bridge, I replied, not hand him a rock. I slid the withdrawal slips back toward him with 2 fingers, the way you return a wallet someone tried to leave in your purse. Tomorrow, daylight, with witnesses, receipts, and the trustee list. If it's worthy of our name, it's worthy of our signatures. He reached for the ledger again faster, finger bent like a hook. I set my other hand on top and felt my mother's sentence rise through the wood. Names on every dollar. I said it out loud so the room could have its spine back. Names on every dollar. His shoulders lowered an inch, then another. He gathered the cards, the slips, the performance. At the door, he tossed, the last cloakroomer keeps handy. You're making this hard. I smiled. I'm making it true. The latch clicked. The night stepped off my porch like it had forgotten its line. I turned the porch light off and left the kitchen light on. Little choreography that tells a house it's safe. I opened the ledger and wrote a line clean as a plumb bob. Tomorrow joint meeting request. Bring witnesses. Ask for board resolutions. No signatures without copies. Then I stacked the bowls, rinsed the spoon, and let the quiet hold. He reached for my ledger. I reached for the switch light chose for us. By dawn, Pressure had learned punctuation. Urgent need 48 hours flashed across a mass email with exclamation points wearing tiny sirens. Group chat sprouted donor shaming like dandelion screenshots size. The word ungrateful used like a broom. I set the phone face down and wrote a list that could stand upright. Legal aid, credit union manager, charity director, church treasurer, daylight only. At legal aid, a counselor with eyes like carved walnut drew 2 columns on a yellow pad. Donations, she wrote, require explicit consent, clear, revocable. Next column, unauthorized wage assignments, different creature, also revocable if not court-ordered. She slid me sample letters: donor consent, revocation, demand for documentation, request for board minutes. Her voice had the calm of a plow. If anyone tells you this must be handled tonight, she said, teach them a new word: tomorrow. I scheduled daylight meetings: credit union at 10, charity director at noon, church treasurer at 2, blinds up. I added to each request: copier, warm water on the table. I CC'd the pastor and the clerk and included my growing index of exhibits. People behave better around stationery. The charity's assistant called with a tone that wanted to be velvet. We can squeeze you in tonight. No, I said, and let the word be a chair I could sit in. Tomorrow with witnesses. She changed keys. There are reputational risks if this becomes public. There are financial risks if it stays private. I answered, not unkind. Bring the trustee list and the bylaws section about assumed donor consent. back home. I assembled my folder like a quilt, statements tabbed and cross-referenced, acknowledgements, stapled, 2 months, the teller's accidental reveal, flagged with a gentle sticky so she wouldn't share the blame. I tucked a spare pen beside the chocolate square, that tells a backbone, it's not alone. Evening returned with drums. If you wait, they'll think you're cruel, one message warned. Another tried, do it for the name. Names are not china you keep from chips by hiding them. Names are aprons. They're meant to do work in the light. I rinsed my cup and set one bowl. I ate the soup I'd planned for, which is a holy thing when your balance tries to write your menu. Then I stood at the window and let the streetlight underline my rigmarole one more time. No decisions after dark. Read twice. The house learned it again, and so, kindly, did I. I slipped the folder into my bag, set my shoes by the door, and let sleep know it was invited. If I wait, they'll call me cruel. If I don't, I'll call myself something worse. Glass is supposed to make people honest. I chose the chair where morning fell straight onto paper. The pastor sat at my left, hat set on the credenza like a promise not to grandstand. The clerk uncapped her pen and dated the margin time room. Witnesses so this moment would know where to find itself tomorrow. The credit union manager arrived with a stack that leaned like an admission. The nonprofit director followed, smile pressed and practiced, with a binder whose tabs tried to look like conscience. We began with names, because names are how rooms remember themselves. The clerk read the first page aloud so the words would have to stand up. Community, family, outreach restricted donor account. Which church is that attached to? I asked. The director lifted a finger, the way people do when they're about to introduce a sentence to a detour. It's not your church's fund, she said. We're a private family outreach nonprofit formed some years back. She flipped to the bylaws and tapped a paragraph raised like a speed bump. We operate under assumed donor consent for recurring gifts originating from family initiatives. Assumed, the pastor repeated, making the word sound as fragile as it is. The manager slid a printout across the table, rooting numbers, marching like ants, arrows mapping money from payroll to processor to WAG to the account with the haloed name. Your transfers were processed through an affiliated processor, he said, and the clerk underlined the bylaw clause, assignment to affiliated processors permitted. The ink didn't tremble. Mine did. I asked for the trustee list and met a surname that shares a fence with mine but not a dinner. I asked how approvals work. The director showed us the section on waived oversight for timeliness, and another that forfeited appeal if donors continued with no formal objection. The bylaws had learned to narrow hallways while sounding helpful. My breath tried to run. I told it to sit. The clerk marked the key sentences with tidy mercy. The pastor leaned in, elbows off the table, and hummed the sound he uses when grieving families sign forms after long nights. I watched the pages the way a nurse watches a monitor. The data didn't lie. It only expected me to agree to the costume. The word family had been stretched like a borrowed sweater until it fit a stranger. We turned to the part that matters. We'll revoke the assumed consent, I said, keeping my voice where my dignity could hear it. We'll require explicit consent for any future gift, with monthly statements and appeal restored. The pastor nodded once. The clerk wrote without looking up. The director tried a gentler key. This could be handled quietly, she offered. Quiet is sometimes a kind of fog. I slid a clean sheet to the center like bread. Here's the humane road, I said. Assumed gives documented, appeal restored, inferred consent removed. Any support for kin moves through daylight at Two-Sinner Trust with receipts and quarterly statements, and no more auto-renewals dressed as mercy. The manager leaned back, changed his posture, and placed 2 fingers on the page. This is sound, he said, which is a banker's way of confessing they've remembered. Math is a language, not a loophole. I looked at the glass walls and the people behind them going about their morning, not knowing a word had been taught to behave. My rule no decisions after dark stood up beside me like an old friend in a new suit. All those nights I had turned the phone face down. Wisdom, not stubbornness. The director lifted her pen. You're asking for a lot, she said. I'm asking for daylight, I answered, and for my name to be mine. What they called charity was a shortcut around my dignity. Rapar has paperwork. I walked the city with a folder that knew my stride. The manager produced board minutes that described generosity in sentences that forgot to include the donor. The clerk helped me request routing maps, lines, and arrows that finally admitted where 903 went every month. The nonprofit emailed pledge cards with boxers pre-checked and donor emails full of words like streamlined and seamless, which are often synonyms for no witnesses. At the branch, the head teller retrieved ATM camera times that matched the minute my ledger flinched, proof that nothing about those transfers required a person in a room, only a clause in a file. I tucked it behind Exhibit C so the story couldn't pretend it had lost its place. At home, I lifted the bread tin lid, and there it was, the pencil line. My late spouse wrote, after we survived a season that didn't love our lungs. Slow is not refusal, slow is repair. I copied it to the folder's first page, where my hand would brush it before any signature. My breath recognized the tempo. Then I drafted the bones. Donor consent, revocation, simple, dated, unambiguous, restricted gift, agreement if we give. It will carry a purpose like a lantern, and report back every quarter. Transparency, addendum, blinds up, notices clear. Renewal only with fresh ink and witnesses. Each paragraph felt like a joist settling under a floor. Allies showed up and spent courage. The clerk agreed to sit for every meeting and stamp every page twice. The pastor said, "I will pray with my eyes open." The legal aid counselor revised my letters so they could stand up in court, or, better, keep us from needing one. Mara baked cookies and, more importantly, put her phone away while I rehearsed my sentences out loud. Every ask cost a relationship chip. A cousin said I was making content out of private matters, as if privacy hadn't been the tool that carved this hole. I wrote receipts in the margin and kept moving. The director hinted at a quiet settlement that smelled like a rug. I opened a window. By evening, my folder had tabbed Exhibits A through J, an index neat enough to teach grammar. The revocation was printed 3 times, signatures ready, envelopes addressed. I slid a chocolate square into the back pocket, not as reward, but as agreement with my bones. We do hard things, and we don't forget sweetness. Someone texted. One signature, and this all goes away. I laid my palm on slow is not refusal and let the pen cool. One signature could end this, or end me. Brescia took numbers and ran them like drills. Sign now, a family elder wrote, and will avoid embarrassment. Embarrassment is the tax secrecy charges the truth. Another offered a quiet settlement, half the money back, no questions asked. Even isn't a feeling, I replied. It's a ledger that can read itself aloud. The rumor thread bloomed like mold. She hates helping. She's hard. She's changed. I set my phone face down and took my folder to the diner where Chrome forgives, no fingerprints. Corner booth, coffee that never gives up. The waitress parked a cup and gave me the nod you give someone meaning business without forgetting kindness. I spread the plan, rules, receipts, grace, rules so the boards don't sag, receipts so memory can be shared, grace so the door still opens for anyone who learns to knock. I practiced the order until my voice and the paper matched. Legal aid texted the line that turned my shoulders into a bridge. Recurring donations require explicit consent. Revocation must be honored. I copied it in block letters on an index card and tucked it behind my agenda, the way a carpenter tucks a square behind an ear. The law wasn't a weapon tonight. It was a plumb line. A cousin came in and saw me not hiding. That did its own work. The bank manager passed by the window and lifted 2 fingers off the steering wheel, which is how some men say you're right without risking a speech. I scheduled the joint meeting, bank, plus nonprofit, plus pastor, plus clerk, and requested blinds up, copier, warm, water, on the table. The director asked whether we could limit attendance to keep it efficient. Efficiency is a fine servant, I said, and a poor host. Bring whoever truth requires. Evening tried to borrow my patience one more time. I paid it back with a tip, tomorrow at 10. Then I walked home at the pace of a woman who knows exactly whose name she's carrying. If they won't sit with grace, I'll sit with God. 3 a.m. is when silence stops, pretending it's shy. The refrigerator hum settles into a hymn. The baseboard ticks like a metronome for courage. I tilt the lamp a finger's width and put the folder in the center of the table, like a loaf meant to feed more than one hunger. I choose the blunt pen, the carpenter one, and pull a clean page. No flourishes. Only beams. Revoke donor consent. Convert to transparent restricted gift sane cap. Quarterly statements. 2. Family aid, trust receipts. Written apology. Public correction. I read each line out loud, letting the vowels square the corners. Revoke because silence is not a signature. Convert because help is not harm in a nicer coat. Quarterly so truth has appointments. Two sinners so love has a guardrail. Apology not to humiliate, to mark the turn. Public because rumor retires when the bulletin speaks. I add joists beneath the beams. Assumed gives documented. Appeal restored. No auto-renewals. Blinds up. Copier warm. Names on every dollar. I outline a small window in the margin and shade it until it looks like morning. The radiator ticks approval, one deliberate inch at a time. I open the bread tin. There's the penciled creed, smudged but steady. Daylight decides. Beneath it, the old note in his hand. Slow is not refusal. Slow is repair. I place both pages beside my plan like elders at a meeting. They say nothing and say it well. I print the donor consent revocation, 3 times date, name, account, explicit withdrawal of permission, effective immediately. I sign with the exact hand that's paid bills, blessed food, and written birthday checks without missing a beat. I address 3 envelopes. Credit Union H. Our donor records hand delivery. Community Family Outreach Director, certified mail, bank manager, email plus hard copy. I press stamps like small oaths and stack green cards for signatures. The pen cap clicks, the room exhales. A wind wanders the block and knuckles the window once. I don't look up. I copy the transparency addenda monthly statements. Renewal only with fresh consent and 2 witnesses. Public notice of revocation rights and clip it to the front. In the lower corner I write the sentence, I will not bargain away. No night decisions. Read twice. The house brings me the faces of the week, the teller with apology eyes. The manager learning to say she's right in a sentence. The director smoothing the page before the lift of her pen. I bless them all. Because blessing costs less than bitterness and buys more light. I rinse a cup I've already washed and leave it to dry. Because ordinary is the jurisdiction of peace. I set 1 bowl at the edge of the table. Ceramic proof that hunger is a citizen here and panic is not. I smooth the table's grain with my palm, grateful for wood that remembers our elbows and our patience. When I'm certain the lines won't wobble at sunrise, I close the folder, square the corners with my fingernail, and slide the envelopes into my bag. Shoes by the door, keys in their dish, lamp eased to dark dot at dawn. I set 1 bowl. It was enough. Morning unlocks clean. I lace my shoes and pick up the list that stood up when I did. First, call credit union. I'm bringing the revocation of donor consent and a transparency addendum. I say, I'll need an acknowledgement on letterhead. The receptionist recognizes a grandmother with a mission and says, yes ma'am. 10 o'clock, blinds up. Second call community family outreach. The director tries, velvet, we can resolve this informally. We can resolve it documentedly, I answer. Prepare the trustee list, bylaws, and a revocation receipt. I book the noon slot and invite witnesses. Third church treasurer, I need a neutral room if the bank runs long. Fellowship hall, he says, coffee on, copier, warm. Fourth legal aid, your forms read clean. The counselor says, email scanned copies to all parties now. Certified mail today, employers and processors must honor revocations. Fifth, I'll pray with my eyes open. 6 clerk tabs, date stamp, extra pens. I'm already in my coat. I walk to HR and hand deliver the revocation. The supervisor signs an acknowledgement of receipt, adds the time, and stamps it so the moment can't claim it forgot. We copy it twice, 1 for their file, 1 for mine. At the post office, the window clerk weighs my certified envelope like a midwife. The green card waits its turn to prove someone met our words at the door. On a bench, I scan and email the packet. Revocation, transparency, addendum index of exhibits and the agenda titled assumed gives documented. Subject line, revocation, attached, proceed on corrected terms only, CC, bank manager, director, HR, legal aid, pastor, clerk. The attachments stride into the message already knowing their places. At 10. The conference room is bright as a decision. The manager lays water in notepads, like treaty offerings. I place the folder center table and pass around pens that don't mistake speed for truth. Noon is reserved across town, but 12 o'clock will not boss us. We will finish what daylight started. A final message sneaks in under the doorframe of the hour. Today or never. I straighten the agenda so the margin breathes and look up with the steadiness I keep for storms and teenagers. Today, by my terms, I say, and the room understands the assignment. Boundary becomes bridge. Blinds up, cup ear warm, water set at every seat. I placed my folder in the center like a loaf and let the room smell the intention. The pastor took the chair to my left, palms open as if to catch anything that tried to fall through the cracks. The clerk dated the margin time room. Would Nessus so this hour could have pretended it never existed. The bank manager adjusted his glasses. The nonprofit director smoothed a tabbed binder. HR came in with a legal pad that looked like it had been told to behave. We'll proceed by timeline, I said, and slid Exhibit A to the middle. Deposit at 9:01, pull at 9:03. Memo family, ACH. Exhibit B, 6 months of the same rhythm. Exhibit C, HR's standing authorization. Exhibit D, the routing map payroll to processor, to WAG to community. Family outreach restricted donor account. First distinction, I said, drawing 2 columns on a blank page. True, charitable, consent, explicit, revocable, documented, reported to the donor, versus assumed, pulls implied, sticky, rooted through clauses no grandmother ever met. I read the bylaws aloud because words behave differently when they have to stand up. Waived oversight. Appeal forfeited. Assignment to affiliated processors. The clerk underlined each phrase with tidy mercy. The harm, I continued, laying the math flat. Paychecks arrive whole and leave thinner than truth. Bills pay late. Fees multiply. And the donor me's protected from the facts by the word family wearing borrowed clothes. The director tried velvet. These are industry standard if we help people faster this way. Fast is not the same as fair, I answered, and family is not the same as permission. I pushed the plan into the center like bread to be broken. Assumed gives documented. Full names, real signatures, dates that answer questions. Appeal restored. No cul-de-sacs, disguised as kindness. Inferred consent removed. Silence retires from the signature desk. Clean routing. A transparent restricted aid plan with a capped, lawful disbursement rate. Monthly statements to the donor and board. Be optional. Family aid. Trust to cosigners. Receipts. Quarterly reports. See ban on auto renewals. Without fresh consent each year. Written apology for the rush. Masquerading as virtue. Public notice to members, donors, revocation rights honored, no shaming. The bank manager set 2 fingers on Exhibit D like a pledge. She's right, he said, not loudly, but in a voice paperwork recognizes. These pulls live closer to a wage assignment than to charity. HR nodded once, relief moving across her face like shade over a field. The conference door opened quietly. A woman stepped in, the one I'd seen behind the WAG window. Not a rival, not a thief. A bookkeeper with clean nails, a careful coat, and a tired grace. She carried a small folder and a photo in a plastic sleeve. A gap-toothed girl with a science ribbon and a grin that hadn't learned dread. I'm Leah, she said, local bookkeeper. I've been blocking late fees where I could to keep accounts from exploding. Her voice shook and kept going. Policy is the wall. I'm not the wall. I turned the plan toward her. We're moving the wall, I said. We'll keep help in daylight, and we'll stop hiring midnight to do daytime's job. The director's pen hovered. We can address some of this quietly, she offered. Publicly, I answered. Steady as a plumb line. Quiet is how good intentions learned to spend other people's names. We worked the clauses like carpenters. The clerk read each change aloud. The pastor kept time with a small hum that said, stay human. We restored appeal, struck inferred consent, and wrote fresh consent annual reviews, large enough to be read without glasses. We capped disbursements, required monthly statements, and inked the 2-signature trust with receipts and quarterly reports. So memory could wear shoes. Leah traced the new routing with her fingertip. This I can steward, she said, shoulders lowering an inch as if a quiet siren had finally clicked off. The director exhaled, a sound like policy remembering people. We'll issue the apology and post the notice to donors and staff, she said, and for the first time her pen looked like a tool, not a wand. We ran the copier. Its hum sounded like order finding its instrument. The manager signed first, ink even. HR signed the revocation acknowledgement and pinned a copy to her folder like a medal for a process that had told the truth. The director signed the new plan. Leah signed the receipt, then tucked the photo of her girl back into her wallet with a hand that finally trusted tomorrow. The clerk stamped the top page date, time, room, witness stand, slid it to me. It felt like floorboards that wouldn't give. We can make this right publicly or quietly. The director tried one last time, habit aching for cover. Publicly, I said, and my name belonged to me again. By week's end, the nonprofit posted a square of plain text that sounded like a window opening. Donor consent required. Revocations honored. No shaming. The bank flagged the old processor codes and offered a no-fee account move with overdraft turned off unless I wink first. HR added a line to onboarding. Recurring donations require fresh consent each year. On Friday, my paycheck landed and stayed. No 903 nibble. The ledger received the numbers like a soldier at attention, and the envelopes filled without apologizing for themselves. The restricted aid plan dispersed from the trust only when 2 signatures agreed and receipts told the month what had happened. Quarterly reports, read clean. Even the paper looked relieved. Small repairs preached. I fixed a loose porch stair with a proper tread rise, and run finally square. I put red-tipped tulips in a jar, and watched the room understand spring. At the library, I wrote a check for light. A week later, the stacks glowed to their corners, and the librarian touched the switch like a blessing. Family thawed at its own pace. One cousin returned a key and a story. I was scared. Another came to carry a box and left a pie, which is how apologies travel in our town. Leah now sent clear statements with notes in the margin. Thank you for insisting on this. The director emailed a formal apology that didn't perform. It simply admitted. The bank manager learned to say my name without extra letters and waved 2 fingers from his steering wheel like a man, rehearsing decency and liking the fit. We held our first quarterly review at a table that remembered everyone's elbows. The clerk checked boxes and stamped dates. The pastor brought coffee that had trained for this moment. HR shared the new policy printout like a proud report card. The numbers behaved under glass. No one raised a voice. No one needed to dot at home. The evening ritual returned with its old shoes. I sat one place most nights, and 2, when wisdom called for company. The phone slept face down after supper. If urgency wanted audience, it could audition at 9 a.m. I pinned the donor notice beside Daylight Decides inside the bread tin. Neighbors, now one a creed, one a correction. A week later a letter arrived, addressed in a hand that used to sprint and now had learned to walk. Inside, no forms, just a sentence. Could we talk at your table? Beneath, a small square to check. Yes. In daylight, I found my pen, the same one I used for blessings and bills, and put a modest check in the box. A letter arrived later this time, asking for a seat, not a signature. Come closer, sweetheart. Let me set this in your palm so you can carry it without dropping your name. A boundary is not a wall against love. It is a door. Doors invite, frames hold the house. Write your frame where your fingers can touch it. No decisions after dark. Read twice. Blinds up. Witnesses seated. Copies carried out. Names on every dollar. If a room leans, touch the wood and listen until the tilt tells you what's wrong. Grace without a frame melts. With a frame, it nourishes. Grace tells the truth, fixes the step, and keeps a chair ready for whoever returns, willing to sit in daylight. Mercy that hides becomes habit. Mercy that stands becomes culture. Patience isn't pretending not to notice. It is steady courage. It gathers receipts, learns the verbs of repair, revoke, revise, root, report, end, waits until morning because truth likes windows. It feels small while you're doing it. Then you look up and the roof is still on. Keep help in daylight. If you give, root it cleanly. The signatures, receipts, quarterly statements. If a clause claims your name, ask to see its handwriting. If a system calls secrecy efficiency, lend it to your dictionary. The right kind of Americanness sounds like a clerk who prints truth, HR that listens, boards that correct, neighbors who witnessed without auditioning for medals, and librarians who changed the bulbs. When night performs urgency, turn your phone face down and invite morning to testify. If the thing is true, it will be truer at 9. If it is decent, it won't mind a window. If you must stand alone, stand at your own table. The people who know you will recognize you there. Tell me in the comments, where did you learn to wait with courage? What sentence are you tucking into your wallet? Who sits beside you when you read the fine print? If this steadied your hands, subscribe, like, and share it with someone who keeps mistaking kindness for surrender. I'm here every Sunday at dusk with another grandmother story, plain, American, and grateful to daylight. There's one more story this table could tell if you'll sit with me next Sunday. By Sunday, the comments changed their weather. The first wave had teeth. This one had hands. I judged you wrong, a neighbor wrote. Thank you for teaching pause. The church bulletin tucked my name between potluck and hymn practice persistence, with Grace plain font, big relief. The nonprofit posted a square of policy that sounded like an apology. Finally learning sentences. Donor consent required. Revocations honored. No shaming. At the corner store, the cashier slid a folded note under my receipt. Proud of you. Mom then rang up the next customer like nothing holy had happened. Rumor threads cooled the way. Steam leaves a winter platform visible, then gone. A cousin who once called me stubborn typed. She waited. Daylight told the truth. And for once, the hearts landed softly, instead of hard. In the break room, a coworker printed my template, walked it to HR with her head high, and came back lighter. I thought I had to live like this, she whispered. I didn't. I clipped the staff memo and set it in the bread tin beside Daylight Decides, so patience and policy could keep house together. Word traveled farther than I set the table for. Evening forgave the day. I tilted the lamp a finger's width and let the room go gold. I set one bowl on the table and breathed. The second waited patient in the cupboard. By choice, not demand. The window held a square of blue dusk. The porch light clicked on like a rule that knows its job. The ledger showed a whole deposit at last. Numbers standing like soldiers who remembered their names. I rinsed a spoon, left it drying on the towel that smells faintly of starch and Sundays. The phone slept face down until morning. If anyone needs my hurry, they can ask the light first. I opened the bread tin policy notice, apology on letterhead, the index card that says be the calmest person in the room, then put them back where patients can find them. Somewhere a bus sighed past our block, a small promise that route still makes sense. We made a habit out of Daylight. We taught money its true last name. Tomorrow will bring prices and errands and the ordinary holiness of supper. For now, the house is steady, the table remembers me, and my name is not on loan. Next week, I'll tell you about the sealed envelope we found in the church piano bench. If this steadied your hands, subscribe, like, and share it with someone who keeps mistaking kindness for surrender. I'm here every Sunday at dusk with another grandmother's story plain American, and grateful to Daylight. Next time, the piano bench envelope and a hard lesson about warning versus welcome giving. Bring your chair, your patience, and your own brave rule. If this gave you courage, come back at dusk. Subscribe next story at dusk. Thank you. Be good to your neighbors. Porch lights on. Soft music holds